Okay. All right, everybody, welcome to today's webinar on connecting ideas. Today is a pretty short webinar. We'll be talking about how to make your papers and essays and other projects you might be working on flow in a way that feels logical and helps your reader get from point A to point B in your ideas in a way that makes sense to them. So it's kind of all under this umbrella of connecting ideas. So how can you tell when you might need some help with connecting ideas? Your professor might be writing comments to you where they say things like your writing is choppy, jumpy, you need help with your flow, you need transitions, or how is this related, things like that. You might have really good ideas, but you're maybe not presenting them in a way where they feel connected, where they feel like they flow, okay? People may tell you that they have trouble following your organization or your train of thought. Again, you still might have amazing ideas, but this is about how you're presenting your ideas so that they make sense to somebody else. You might also write the way you think. So maybe you started without an outline and you just started writing because you're pretty confident in your ideas, and that's fine, but sometimes that means that your paper ends up being written kind of in a stream of consciousness. So it can help really to sit back and think about how you're going to connect all of your ideas. This happens quite often in group papers where you have 2 or 3 or 4 people all working together on the same essay. And so you said, okay, Charlie, you write page 2, and Sharon, you write page 4, and then you just paste it all together. Now, what can happen there is that you maybe didn't all follow the same plan. You'd all definitely have different writing styles. And so it can feel very abrupt to the professor who's reading that if you're just copy and pasting all of your pieces into one go without then working on the transitions and making sure that everything feels cohesive. Like I said, working on a group paper as well, okay? So connections and flow, there are really 2 aspects of the feeling of flow, of the feeling of the ideas being connected. One of them is the order in which you organize your parts, okay? So this can be kind of the macro, stepping back. Did you use an outline for your paper? Did you organize your ideas in a way that makes sense from kind of a bird's eye view? And then also, did you connect explicit relationships? Did you, construct explicit relationships between your ideas? Sometimes it may feel to you that the relationships are obvious, but a lot of times your reader actually needs you to hold their hand a little bit and make those connections between ideas, those relationships, very clear and very explicit. Okay. So it's always good to start with good organization. Okay. So you've heard me say a couple of times already, it's helpful to create an outline that helps you know that your ideas are going to generally move along in a order that makes sense to your reader. This can help you also consider how the ideas relate to one another. And so how do you want to present them? And then also, how do they relate to one another? What do you want to start with? What can you build on after that? Things like that. If you have already started writing or you're already finished writing, but you didn't use an outline and you suspect that maybe your organization is not as cohesive as it could be, I often recommend to students to do this activity called a reverse outlining activity. And essentially with reverse outlining is you look at your paper and you read it yourself, and either in the margins of the page or on a separate piece of paper or in a separate document, you actually write out the outline as the paper is written. And that can help you revisit like, oh, I thought that this idea really connected to this, but the way that I wrote this didn't make that clear because I talked about idea A first instead of idea B. So it can be really helpful if you started writing and you don't already have an outline and you were just writing cold. It can be really helpful if you feel like your organization is not as good as it could be for you to step back and make an outline based on what you already have written, which you can then adjust and change things around once you get an idea of what the big picture is. Okay. Like I said, you want to be looking at the ideas, connect logically. Okay. So then thinking about the relationships that you construct between the ideas. So to do this, you can use transition words, you can use keywords and synonyms, okay? You can make the logical connections very explicit. So these are the 3 ways to discuss the relationships between your ideas. So we're going to start first with transition words. So with transition words, the type of transition word that you're going to choose, you should consider the relationships between the ideas first. So are we talking about contrast? If you're contrasting ideas, 2 things that are different, then you can use words like but, however, nevertheless, on the one hand, on the other hand, still. If you're comparing 2 things, if they are alike, then you can use these words or similar. This is not an exhaustive list. If you're giving an example, are you emphasizing something? Like sometimes you really want to almost underline an idea for your readers. And generally in academic writing, we're not actually underlining anything, but we can use transition words like indeed or in fact to provide some emphasis to our readers so that we can say, hey, pay attention to this. This is a really important point. And if you're talking about cause and effect, you can use words like because, so, therefore, hence, consequently, things like that. And in my email that I email you after this, that will include the recording of this presentation. I will also include a transition word. I think I might call them connectors handout, which is just basically like the different types of connecting words, the different types of transition words, and how to use them grammatically. This handout is helpful, I think, for everyone, but especially if you're a non-native speaker, it can really help to see how the grammar is different for some of these words. For example, but and however, dictionary-wise, they mean the same thing, but how we use them in the sentence grammatically and with punctuation and things like that is different between the 2. So it can be really helpful. I'll send you this document when I send this video. Okay. All right, so some keywords. When you're writing, you're going to have a main topic, and that main topic is going to have some keywords that are attached to it. So you can repeat keywords within paragraphs and sections. Many times students are trying to avoid repeating the same word over and over because they've been told not to be redundant, that they should add more interest in their word choice. And that is true. You don't want to use the exact same words every single time. But if it's a keyword, if it's a word that's important to understanding your topic, then it's okay to repeat it. Again, within reason. So it's okay to repeat it though, because then it really brings it home for your reader that this is an important concept that they need to pay attention to. Now, if you are afraid of it sounding repetitive, so if you're writing a paper about the economy, so you could, rather than trying to say, economy, 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 then you could change the part of speech, change it from a noun to an adjective and say economic. Okay, so if every sentence is going to have the same word and you're afraid that's going to be too redundant, too repetitive, you can change the part of speech but keep the same key word there so that your reader's brain is still going to pick up on that this is an important idea. One thing that I want to point out is that synonyms are not always perfectly interchangeable. Okay, so if you're getting out a thesaurus in order to avoid to avoid using the same word over and over, that's okay, but make sure you check how that word actually looks in sentences, because sometimes they don't exactly mean the same thing. So if we were thinking about economy, well, an economy is a financial system, but the economy is actually a little bit bigger than a financial system. So just subbing the word financial system does not really capture the same idea that economy does. So it's important to think about, if you are using synonyms, that they are actually synonyms for one another, or that the word you're choosing will work. Okay. Okay, now the flow. When you're discussing new ideas, the order in which the ideas appear, it matters. Okay, and I'll show you some examples here. So first we'll talk about, though, the stress position. The second or last part of the sentence in English is often used to put the most important idea. So it's stressing something there. The topic position of the sentence is the first part of the sentence. So oftentimes, excuse me, this isn't always perfect, but oftentimes in English, we'll write a sentence that has the topic of the sentence at the beginning and the important information is at the end of the sentence. Now, this isn't perfect, but it also moves from, we can also think of it as old to new information. So the first part of your sentence, the topic, is often old information that you've already given to your reader. You are connecting something. And then the new information will come after that. So I can show you some examples of that. So here's some example sentences here. So I'm going to give you two sentences. I want you to tell me which sentence sounds like you might get a raise. Okay. So we have these two sentences here. You deserve a raise, but the budget is tight. The budget is tight, but you deserve a raise. Now, which one of these, one or two, sounds like you are possibly getting a raise? Exactly. Number two, the stress position. So the important information here is that we think you deserve a raise, right? In the first one, it's we think you deserve a raise, but I don't think we can do it. And so the order that we put the parts of the sentences actually changed the meaning. Okay, let's look at another one. Which sentence sounds like you might get a good grade? You've participated very actively, but you haven't turned in much homework. You haven't turned in much homework, but you've participated very actively. Now, which one sounds like you might get a good grade in the class? Yeah, same as before. Okay, so it sounds like, so we started with, you know, if you start with a positive and end with a negative, then the negative is what's going to sound like the most important piece, and vice versa. If you start with a negative, you haven't turned in very much homework, but you've participated very actively, that positive part is what your reader is going to walk away with. So when I say the stress position tends to have the most important information, that's what I mean, because we have the same information in each of these sentences, but the order that we provide them changes the meaning for the reader. Okay, now if we were thinking about flow, if we were thinking about the next sentence that might come after that, we might write something like, the budget is tight, but you deserve a raise. Okay, the raise will come into effect next pay period. So here, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about this, we have the raise is in the stress position at the end of the sentence. And then we start the next sentence with the word raise again. And so we're connecting them like they're links of a chain. You deserve a raise. The raise will come into effect next pay period. So the raise was the old information. Pay period is the new information telling you when it'll come. You haven't turned in much homework, but you participated very actively. Because of this active participation, I'm adding extra credit to your grade. Okay, so again, here, these are the following sentences that are using the flow, the logical flow that your reader might expect, going from old information to new information. So here's how this might look on a paragraph level. Here I have a paragraph that is grammatically correct, but logically is a little bit hard to follow. So I'm going to read it over to you first. The compact fluorescent bulb has been the standard bulb for household lamps. Until recently, most people used incandescent bulbs in their lamps. Heating a tungsten filament until it glows, throwing off light, is how this type of bulb operates. Unfortunately, approximately 90% of the energy used to produce the light is wasted by heating filament. Okay. So there we have the full sentence, sorry, the full paragraph rather, and grammatically it's correct. But as far as flow goes, it's got some stops and starts. So let's examine that a little bit. So here are some of the key words that you can see are repeated through here. So we have the word lamps, we have the word bulb, and we have tungsten or tungsten filament or filament. Okay. For each of these, hold on just one second. Somebody's asking me a private question. The person who typed me a question in there, that's, could you send me an email with that question? Because it's not really pertinent to this workshop. So if you could email me with that question, I'm happy to answer it for you. Okay, so we have our key words here, but you'll notice that they're not really close to one another. We have the word lamps in the stress position of that first sentence, but then we don't have it. We would kind of expect the next sentence to start with the word lamps, just like what we had before, where it was, you deserve a raise, the raise will come into effect. We expect those like keywords to be next to each other. So let's look at another example. So this example has been rewritten in a way that flows a little bit better. So we have the compact fluorescent bulb became the, sorry, I have to move this. The compact fluorescent bulb has become the standard bulb for household lamps. Until recently, most lamps used incandescent bulbs. So notice that in our first one, we ended with lamps, but then we didn't hear lamps again until the end of the next sentence. With this one, we've rewritten it so we have lamps and lamps next to each other, again, like links of a chain, okay? Until recently, most lamps used incandescent bulbs. This type of bulb operates by heating a tungsten filament until it glows, there we go, throwing off light. Unfortunately, heating the filament wastes approximately 90% of the energy used to produce the light. So again, the first paragraph was not grammatically incorrect. It just didn't flow very well. And so by changing the order of how the sentences were presented, it flows a little more logically, and your reader is going to get a better sense of your full idea. Okay. So in terms of your full essay, this same idea scales up to the entire essay. You can consider the order in which you're presenting your ideas, and then the first and last sentences of your paragraphs can link together, similar to how the first and last parts of each sentence in our previous example link to one another. You can be thinking about how everything links together like links of a chain. Okay. All right, so that's it. I said that was about 15 minutes, and so there we are at about 15 minutes since I started. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to either unmute yourself or type it in the chat. I will hang out for a few more minutes to answer any questions anybody may have. Again, this is being recorded, but I'm about to stop the recording. So if you would like to ask me a question while not being recorded, you can do so now.